Hey guys, I want to come back with another video talking about what you want to look for whenever you buy a used diesel truck, or I'll also be throwing in some things that are specific to these 4th gen Rams when it comes to looking to either get your first one or looking to get a later model, because there's a few things that are different from these Cummins that, you know, the earlier 99s to what year 2006 didn't have, you know. So I'll be showing some of those key differences. I'll be taking on a test drive, showing what to look for in these transmissions and the gauges, oil pressure, all that. All right, so some of the first things that you can do when you pull up to the truck, maybe the owner's inside coming outside or something like that, you can take a look at the tires, because these trucks like to have a lot of suspension problems and steering problems. And you look at the tread from out here to in here to just all around the tire. If you see more tread wear on the outside, it could be a wheel bearing or ball joints or some steering linkage. Maybe it needs to get aligned. And you could also look around the circumference of the wheel, just in the center, see if it has more wear right here than, let's say, over here. Could indicate a bent wheel or a dry tire, something like that. Another thing I like to do is I only like to look at trucks when it's not raining. When it's dry outside, you can see all the little scratches and scrapes this truck has. This one I did go look at in the rain, but it's a newer truck, and most time with bigger scratches, like this is the only one you could see. You'll see these big ones despite if there's water or not, but you won't see little things like this. This is just clear coat, it'll buff out, but still save you a bit of time and work if you negotiate the price, maybe 200 bucks off from that. Another thing that I like to look at is, as you're taking a look around, take a look up underneath it, check for surface rust, check for axle seal leaks. It's a big one on these Rams, or just any diesel truck, because they're always a pain. You're gonna look at the bottom of the spindle over there, right there, on both sides. And you could also, on these Rams, if you take a look, you can see with a flashlight, you can see the brake pad life over there. I noticed that this thing needs rear sway bar links. See the boots are off down here, and they have play in them. So that was a good negotiating point. When you come around front, you're gonna do that. You're just gonna stand in front of the truck. Here, I'll show you what one looks like. This one has a driver's side axle seal leak. You can't really see it without a flashlight, but it's a little bit wet right around the bottom of that spindle. This side's all good. Another thing you want to do, just don't be afraid to crawl up underneath the truck, Take a look at the oil pan, take a look at the transmission, and then take a look at the cross members back here. Whenever you have an oil leak, they can clean up the engine, but most people won't clean up when it flings back onto the cross member or onto the rear diff or the drive shaft. It's a really good sign when you get there and everything is spotless. There's no surface rust, there's no oily mess under there, it doesn't look all grimy. Once you're ready to take a look on the inside, these diesel trucks like to have higher miles, like 150, 200, maybe 300 even. And a lot of people like to say that it's all highway miles. That's where these diesel trucks do the best. They have the least wear at consistent speeds. So a good indication is to look at the edge of your seat, especially on a bigger truck like this, like a lifted truck, or just pretty much any diesel truck people are gonna have to hop into. If they've been getting in and out a lot, you'll see they slide down this just with time. No matter how much you try to hop, you'll end up sliding down it. So take a look at this edge of the seat, take a look at the carpets. This one, I've been daily driving, it's a bit messy, but just see how they treat their truck. Is there dirt stuck in there? Is there oil? Is the door panel scratched up? This dude had dogs, so they're not perfect, but I used to detail cars, so it's not a big deal for me. Once you get around to underneath the hood, some of the first key things that I look for is I look for any sort of streaking of wet oil coming down the sides of the valve cover, sides of the block. I try to look for any exhaust leaks along the manifold. You'll see that it'll have like a soot buildup around there. It'll have just black charcoal like. You'll even get it on some gas cars too if the exhaust leak is bad enough. I like to check the condition of the brake fluid. You check if it's dark, see if they maintain that. If not, that's another thing you'll have to do. Just take a look up in there. This one needs to be changed. So this one's pretty nasty. I like to look at the batteries. On these diesel trucks, batteries can get expensive. You know, they can get up to 500 bucks for a pair of them. So I like to look, you know, what's the date on these. These are getting older. The dude actually replaced that one right before I bought it, but didn't do this one. So I noticed that I have to get one more battery. Take a look at the air filter, you know, check if they maintain it, if they keep it clean, if it has an aftermarket filter like this. If it's got a stock one, you know, it's not too big of a deal. But these aftermarket filters, people like to leave on there and they think, oh, it's got a lifetime warranty, I'll just run it. But, you know, they still need to clean it every 10,000 miles, 5,000 miles. This dude took really good care of this one. It's nice and clean. It's oiled filter, so it is reusable, you know. You can just check, you just look around, you know, check the condition of your hoses, check if they're, you know, if there's any rubber coming off on the bottom, like flaking off, dry rubber, because this is a 10-year-old truck, you know. It's got 175,000 miles. Stuff's gonna wear out. It's not the end of the world. Take a look at your serpentine belt down there. This one looks good. You can see it's all even. But if you see cracking on there, if you see anything like any uneven wear, any threads showing in there, you know, it's just all negotiating tactics. And it's up to you to tell if you are up to fix it, if you want to pay for it to fix it. But every little thing that you see in here, you could add up to take off the price, you know? Like I saw brake fluid needed to get changed and needed to put in a battery. I didn't see any leaks, but I saw that axle seal leak. So this is all little stuff that will add up, you know. You can get $1,000, $2,000 off the price. Another thing is, if you're looking at these older trucks, like these older 6.0s, these 7.3s, the Huey injection systems, you want to ask to see it when it's cold. You know, those trucks have cold starting issues, they may have hot start issues. So before you get there, you know, text the guy a couple hours before or the morning of, say, hey, do you mind leaving the truck cold when I get there? You want to pay attention to how it starts up. On these newer Cummins, it's not too big of a problem. You know, these things never really have problems with starting. But ask if he can have it cold for you. Maybe it's his daily driver, he can't do it. It's not the end of the world, but it'll just help you see, you know, maybe it cranks for two extra seconds, or maybe it really takes a while to build up that high pressure oil. Just, it'll help you stay away from these red flag trucks pretty much. A good way to tell if the truck has been cold, if the dude's saying it's cold, if it's ice cold, you should be able to put your hand, this one's hot right now, so I'm not gonna do it, but you should be able to hold your hand on the exhaust manifold. You won't feel any warmth at all, it'll be cold. You know, and if the dude's saying it's cold, but the exhaust manifold's warm or it's hot, it's not a good look for him. There's gotta be something up with the truck, you know? Now, to inside the cab. You know, take a look at your steering wheel, see how worn down it is. They have a seat cover on it, they have a steering wheel cover. You know, take a look at all your screens, your knobs. People like to use these trucks for work. Like, I'm a diesel mechanic, but some people don't wash their hands before they get in their truck, and they like to touch all the knobs and touch all the buttons, and you'll see the stickers wear off. It'll just give you more insight on the truck. You know, you'll find little things. This one doesn't have anything, luckily, but you'll see like a button will be rubbed off in the exhaust brake and whatnot. You know, you'll see this stuff like this popping up, you know, these Dodge's interiors. This I thought was just a door switch, but turns out the door panel needs to be replaced down there. It's cheap plastic and whatnot. It's not a big deal, it's an extra 150 bucks, but you know, just look for little things like that, stuff out of place. Now when it goes to starting it, let me get the keys. You want to listen to it crank, you know? Just for the split second it does. Make sure you don't hear any funny noises, no belt squeak, no knocking before it cranks, you know, no extended crank. This one doesn't have any problems with starting, so. Starts up nice and good. First thing I do is take a look at the oil pressure, see how that looks, you know. I'll go over to my gauges on here. Right here. You know, just take a look, make sure there's no oil pressure problems. You know, on these newer trucks, it's harder to hide if they're cold or not, you know. It'll tell you right away the coolant temp. It'll tell you all the temperatures right on the dash. Now when it comes to up front, when it comes to checking blow-by, you only want to do that when it's warm. So after you took your truck for a test drive, you want to check the blow-by. What you're going to do is you're going to pop off the cap. Now hold it upside down, make sure it doesn't vibrate off. This one's not blowing up at all. This is a healthy engine. Some power strokes have haze coming out, these Cummins, you know, this thing doesn't have anything. Let's put that back on. I forgot to add this into the video, but I want to add this in a voiceover just so you guys know what blow-by is and what you're looking for. It's when there's excessive pressure and crankcase pressure. Pretty much from combustion gases getting past the piston rings and getting sent into the oil crankcase, and then they find their way up to the top to the crankcase vent and the oil cap. So you're looking to see if it'll have pressure lifting up that oil cap and see if there's a good amount of haze coming out. On these higher mileage Cummins, you may hear a little bit of clackiness up there. It could indicate that it needs, you know, an overhead on it. It could need a valve adjustment. Maybe it has a little bit of lifter noise or bottom end noise. Best way you can tell is if you come down to the fender liner, you'll hear any knocking coming straight from the side of the block. It'll be a lot quieter from all the valve train up top, and you'll hear all the, you know, the rods going around. You'll see if there's a loose wrist pin or maybe a worn down bearing. This one's nice and smooth. It's not uneven or anything. It's a little bit clacky up top, but it's not bad. You know, maybe this thing needs an overhead on it every, you know, these trucks need them on every 150,000 miles. It's not the end of the world. It's not hard to do, but more negotiating. Something else I like to do is I like to take a look. I turn on the lights. I like to take a look around the truck, make sure all the lights are working. You know, this one didn't come with these Alpha Rexes, but when it had the normal halogen ones, you check all the bulbs by it, you check the plate lights, you know. You come around and you check the mirror lights up here. Check your side markers, your headlights, your fog lights. Make sure everything's working as it should. These newer trucks will let you know if a light is out, but on these older Fords, these older Dodges, you know, they're not always gonna say your headlight's out. You gotta actually get out and take a look. On these older trucks, it's very important that you check it for rust, you know. I live in Florida, so it's not too big of a problem, but you know, up in the Midwestern states or even getting up there in like Tennessee and all that, you want to check these rockers down here. You want to make sure there's no bubbling, no paint peeling or nothing. It's normal if you have like a rock chip or two, especially with bigger tires, but just kind of tap around it. This one all sounds like metal. There's no Bondo in here. There's nothing like that. And then take a look up underneath it. See if there's any surface rust on there. This one looks brand new up underneath here, but you know, you're not gonna get this on a 2000 Ford, you know? It's very important that you take a look. Rust is like cancer, you know? Even if it has a little bit, and give it a year or two, and that's gonna spread like a wildfire. So be very mindful, be very aware when you're going to buy a truck. Once you're back in the truck, you know, you're about to take it for a test drive. Put it in a drive, put it into reverse. Feel for any clunks in the U-joints or any sort of, you know, just weird noises. Whenever you start off going slow, you hit some bumps, let's say you're on like a rougher road, or say you're even on a smooth road. Try to hit, not like a big pothole, but just try to go over a few bumps, listen to all the suspension, listen to the shocks, listen to the tie rods, listen to the steering box, you know, make sure there's no clunking. Some trucks have aftermarket stabilizers that like to come loose. So it's a hands-free camera mount. Don't mind this. On these trucks, whenever the transmission's going out, you like to get a flare. So that's when, let's say it's going from, these trucks like to get it from 4th to 5th. So you're shifting from 4th gear to 5th gear, and the RPM will go up a little bit. You'll hear it, but it won't shift just yet, and then you'll feel it clunk into place, you know? It's not gonna be like a hard slip. It's gonna be more smooth, but you'll hear it. Like, it's gonna be pretty obvious. This one doesn't have it, so I can't show it, but it's exactly what it sounds like, just a flare in the RPMs right before it shifts. Feel for any rough shifting. You know, if your truck has trans tuning and an aftermarket valve body like this one does, it's not gonna be like a perfectly smooth, you know, it's gonna be more rugged, but it's still not gonna be slipping, you know. You can still tell what's the difference between a worn out transmission and a sturdy and just solid shifting one. Take a look at all your temperatures, you know, keep an eye on your coolant temperature, your oil temperature on these 6.0s. You know, they like to have oil cooler problems. It's all of these trucks, your PSI, oil pressure, you know, keep an eye on all that. On these Rams, the transmission fluid temperature right there, that's what kills these transmissions. And these transmissions can get up there for a built one, like 5 to 10 grand, you know. They like to get up pretty high in price. Heat is what kills these, you know. People, you see a lot of aftermarket coolers on them and thermostat bypasses. It really prolongs the life of this transmission. You know, if you're looking at a truck and it has those things, it's a really good sign that this dude likes to take care of his truck. You know, you see trans tuning on it, you see aftermarket valve body, aftermarket cooler. He's got all the services done. You know, pull up the Carfax, pay that extra 20 bucks before you go buy a $20,000 truck, you know. See if there's any accidents on it, you know, a salvage title, a flood title. Just take a look at all that. Now, when I'm going down the road, I like to see how the steering wheel is pulling, you know. This truck's got bigger 37, so it's not perfect, but it pulls a little bit to the side, but this road's also a little crooked. So going down the highway though, let's say if you get it up to 50, 60, which in these trucks you should ideally get it up to 60, 70 highway speed and see how it shifts all the way up into those overdrive gears. But just listen for any clunks, anything that sounds loose, any ringing noises, you know. You'll feel like whenever you turn the wheel, it'll have like a click pretty much in it. You know, that can indicate the ball joints of the wheel bearings. And once you're in the interior, you know, just start pressing buttons, you know, start making sure every button works in here, you know. Make sure the fan slider works, turning up the air, turning it down. You know, just check on everything. It's very important that if you're gonna buy a $20,000, $30,000 truck, that you don't get another 10 grand worth of work, 5 grand worth of work, because it may not look like much when you're looking at it, but you add it up, you know. Got all your maintenance, you got to do your transmission flush, you got to do your transfer case fluid and oil change, your fuel filters. It seems like basic maintenance, but you go to a shop and you get that done and it ends up being like a $3,000 bill, $2,000 bill. You know, your axles, your front and rear, your crankcase filter, you know, just things on these higher mileage trucks that you can't avoid. And that's where coming into play, like maybe you should spend the extra 20 grand, 10 grand if you have it to get a newer truck, let's say that has 60,000 miles instead of 120, or maybe 100,000 miles instead of 200,000. It's these little things that will all add up. And stuff that no matter how good you take care of your vehicle, they're gonna show up, you know. Just normal driving. Doesn't mean you abuse it, doesn't mean that there's something wrong with this truck, but you can't avoid it. It's the inevitable. You want to find somewhere that's straight and you want to be able to get on the gas a little bit, you know. Feel how it shifts. This one shifts pretty nice. There's no clunking, it's nice and smooth. Obviously you don't have to like floor it or anything, but right there, you know, just good 3/4 throttle. Feel how it spools up. Make sure that the turbo actuator is free. Make sure it's not seizing up. Make sure you don't have to replace that, because that's another $2,000 part, you know. And just get a feel for the truck, you know. It's really good if you've had a truck before and you know what they're supposed to feel like, know what they're supposed to brake like and steer like. You know, on these diesel trucks, they have hydro boost systems, so the brake pedal is not going to feel the same as your normal gas truck. You know, it's not going to be as firm. You're going to be able to push it to the floor, but it doesn't mean it's a bad truck. It's good if you have experience with these trucks to be able to go look at them. You know, maybe you have a friend that has a diesel truck, or your dad or your uncle or something. It's just nice to have someone else there with you. Another thing to do, even if you're up north in the winter, or you're in you know, just one of the colder states, you want to make sure your heat works and you want to make sure your AC works, you know. Don't be afraid to crank it up and put it on all these different speeds, and don't be afraid to turn up the heat if it's in the summer, you know. Just doesn't mean you have to keep it on, but just get a feel for it, you know. If your truck has heated seats, make sure the button stays on, make sure they're not flashing and turning off, and just, you know, really push buttons. Just get used to the truck. Check the cruise control. You don't have to like turn it on, but just, you know, press the steering wheel buttons, make sure they're not sticking. Make sure all your windows roll down and roll back up just fine, you know. Just these little things, the details pretty much. So once you're all done with your test drive, you know, pop open the hood, take a look at everything again, make sure there's no leaks that they tried to clean up, make sure there's no coolant dripping from underneath it or anything. And now's a good time to check your blow by. You know, you see it's up to temperature over there. You took it for a pretty lengthy test drive. You know that's up to temperature. But since we already did that, I'm going to show you another thing I like to do. I like to come around to the back, to the exhaust. You probably won't be able to hear me once I get back over here, but I like to hold my hand and feel the pressure coming out. Make sure it's even, make sure it's not choppy. It should be nice and smooth. This one's nice and consistent, nice and smooth, the constant flow. So whenever you go to look at one of these trucks, you know, I ended up hitting a bump and all of this stuff, you know, I'm not gonna say it, but it fell off. Same thing with the exhaust, you know, there was no replacement in the area, so I just had to go and find a pipe from Home Depot and threw it in there. But you wanna check, you're gonna have something right here. It's called a cooler, your EGR cooler. And you're gonna wanna check, make sure there's no dripping coming off of it. Make sure, you know, it's very common, we see EGR coolers on the 2007.5 to 2012 trucks. It's the first iteration of the EGR. It's not gonna be perfect. It's gonna have its flaws. You know, the valves like to get stuck. It likes to get all gummed up. On these higher mileage trucks, if they're not weight reduced, you know, it's a really bad sign for the engine. You have all that, it's like sucking in your own fart, you know. You don't want to do that. You don't want to breathe in what you expel, but that's exactly what these trucks do from the factory. It's gonna gum up your oil, it's gonna gum up all your intake valves and your turbo down there. It's really bad for the engine. Same thing when it comes to your DPF and SCR. You know, you don't want to have a truck that's been driven just on these back roads. You know, maybe it's a 5-mile trip to work and 5 miles back just in the city. You don't want to buy a truck like that if it still has all the emissions. It's going to get all sooted up. You're going to have to change that DPF. It's going to be a couple $100, maybe a couple grand. And it's not practical to have to spend that money replacing that DPF. You know, sometimes your truck just has to go on a diet. Keep in mind though, if you live in a state where they have emissions, like let's say California, I don't think Utah has them, but just New York, California, you're gonna need those emissions. This truck, you know, over there would not pass. I would not be able to register this thing for road use, and I would probably have to either revert it to stock or scrap the truck. You know, I think there's a man in Nevada or Utah or something like that who had to do that to his truck. It's a horrible story. He ended up parting it out and he bought a new one, but keep that in mind. Sometimes you just have to deal with that emissions. Now, this is not a perfect list, but it really should give you a good start on, you know, looking at your truck. It'll give you a good base, so you have some grounds to negotiate off of. You know, you can get off a good $1,000, $2,000. It'll all add up, you know. Like this truck, it was listed for 32. We got it for 31 because I saw a few small things in it. You know, it's a solid truck. You know, there's no weird noises. It's been well maintained. It's got all the Carfax, all done at dealers. You know, this is an ideal truck, but not everyone can afford like a well-maintained truck. So, you know, whenever you're looking at the older ones, the 2010 to 2012, you know, just pay that $20, get the Carfax. It's really gonna make it worth it when you spend 20 grand on a truck, you know. If there's anything that I missed in this video, please let me know down in the comments. It's just a good base, and see you guys in the next one. See ya.